All right. Hello and welcome to Ask Me Anything about AI augmented content webinar by AIGG and sponsored by 52 Limited. Today we're going to, excuse me, I should know better and turn my phone off so it doesn't make noise. Today we're going to talk about protecting your creativity, your work, your brand. We're going to talk a little bit about prompting and favorite tools, publishing, all of that around creativity and AI augmentation. Ask questions in the QA. We will get to them, I promise. And if we don't, for some reason, we'll get you an email. Also, this webinar will be posted on AIGG's blog. Is that right, Drew? I think that's right. Yeah, great. So we'll post that so you can watch it and share it with folks that you work with and friends. And I, of course, want to thank our friends and sponsor 52 Limited, which is Colleen, represented by Colleen today. I'll let her tell you a little bit about 52 Limited when I ask her to introduce herself along with the rest of the panelists. But first, the AIGG plug. We were founded on the idea that we could support organizations on their journey through AI, specifically around governance and ethics. We are C-suite leaders, lawyers, designers, brand strategists, and anthropologists. And we are here to answer any and all of your questions around AI governance. My name is Trisha Blum. I am what I call a recovering lawyer and also a recovering CEO. Prior to joining AIGG or founding AIGG with folks, I worked as a coach and consultant for businesses across the United States, providing strategic advice around important questions, including operations, finance, and governance, as well as risk management. And again, thank you to all of our panelists for being here. Colleen, take it away. Tell us a little bit about 52 Limited and yourself, please.
I'm Colleen. I'm a senior talent manager at 52 Limited. We are a boutique staffing agency, and we live at the intersection of tech and creative. We do all sorts of different types of jobs all over the place, from long-term, short-term contract to hire, and direct hire. And because we're a boutique agency, we have the luxury of focusing on our clients and the talent experience. So, we do the hard jobs, the niche jobs that, the hiring managers don't have the luxury of time a lot of times. So they'll come to us to help us find the right candidate, to help them do what they do best.
Love that. Carrie, I'm going to ask you to go next because what I want to do is have Drew introduce himself after you, and then I'm going to launch right into a question for him.
Yep, perfect. I'm Carrie Javine. I co-founded this group with the folks that you see on the screen and some others who couldn't be here today. And I'll just ditto what Trisha said, which is we're really looking to help organizations be smart and safe and ethical about this new really amazing technology. My background is in law. I am not a recovering lawyer. I am still deep in it, and I did that for 25 years, both at big law and in-house. I have represented Fortune 100 companies, 500 companies, small businesses, nonprofits, the gamut, and had the opportunity to advise on risk and governance issues and make sure that there's policies and procedures in place around technologies like this so that you can actually move forward in a way that you feel confident in and not like you've got your flank completely exposed. Because we do want to say that we're bullish on the technology, but certainly a little bit of caution and smarts is recommended. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, Drew, do you want me to ask the question and then you'll introduce yourself and answer it, or you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and then I'll ask the question?
I'll tell you a little bit about myself.
Great.
I'm Drew Martin, a creative director and designer. Do a lot of work with startups and evolving businesses, and The key to my services is brand strategy that really encompasses a lot of different things these days. It's everything from how it looks to how it dovetails into your business plan. So often startup businesses position themselves based on certain ideas that they have in mind, and that's where I come in is someone that has a lot of experience working with entrepreneurs and startups and evolving businesses, helping them shape how they are perceived. So that's kind of my specialty.
That's awesome. Thank you. What Drew didn't say is he's also a photographer and he owns his own studio, Moto Interactive. And so this question's really going to you as a creative. Can you describe how you're using AI today and what your journey has been like? So it's a two-pronged question.
Sure. Yeah. So, using AI today in a variety of ways, from concepting to final product. And I know that the latter portion of that, the final product, is something that's unique because we're in such early stages. People are really nervous about how they can use AI in terms of that final product and what's delivered. As we'll talk about, I'm sure, as part of this group, it gets into the legal topics, but I think it's a special thing that I've really leaned into in terms of my workflow. So AI has been critical for things lately. Loving it. And then in terms of the second part of that question was
Journey.
The journey. Yes, the journey has been very unique for me. It began as just a curiosity, and then it quickly became something that has been a part of the workflow for me. It is something that, through testing and through heavy study, really understanding what the different tools can do, because they are not all the same. That has really led to, for certain specific types of creative deliverables, illustration, for concepting different video processes, like creating a video and using it to help concept that video. It's really gone from zero to a big part of what we do at Moto really quickly. So, and we fully embrace that because that's just been part of what I do in terms of running a studio, what I've always done in terms of technology, because I know that the sooner that you're adopting these technologies, that you're going to be better off in terms of competition, but also just in finding what works best for you. And these tools can really help very much with how productive you can be as a designer and as a creative.
Thank you. And I'm going to remind everyone to please put your questions in Q&A. You can ask one of our panelists specifically a question or a general question. I know I had about 7 questions that popped in my mind as Drew was speaking. Let's jump really quickly because I have some bigger, tougher questions. But Drew, we'll start with you since you've just answered, and then we can bump around to Colleen. What are your favorite AI tools to use as a creative?
Yeah, the popular ones are DALL-E by ChatGPT and Midjourney. Those are the ones that I've used and that we use here at Moto. They are leaders in terms of not only what you can do with them in terms of control, but also in terms of ease of use. DALL-E with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is such a more common use kind of tool that people are used to working with, that is very conversational. And that's how DALL-E ends up working as well, because it's part of that same tool. And the conversational aspect makes it really easy and approachable to get things started from the concept onward. Midjourney is much more of the powerhouse tool, where you have a lot more control. It works a little bit more like programming in that you're prompting. People call it prompt engineering, and you really have to understand a lot more about what you're talking about and the order that you're saying things and the detail that you're putting into this. So I'd equate that much more to something like advanced Photoshop versus something like Adobe Express as a good comparison to something like DALL-E. So they're very different in terms of how they work. And actually, we use them together. One can feed from one to the next.
Love that. Okay, Colleen, your favorite. creative tool?
Yeah, I mean, Drew nailed it with Dolly. I wish I had more time to like mess around with it. I kind of lost some sleep when ChatGPT first came out because I used it so much to try. I mean, just like, it was like having like an oracle in my phone as I was trying to go to bed, What I found interesting though, so we recently published an article on our LinkedIn page. The copy we wrote with the writer and with our founder Brooke Skilly, but all of the images I created in Dolly for the purpose, because the article is about the future of AI. And I was like blown away with what it came up with these. I was like, this is what the topic is. Like I put all the copy in there and I said, this is what we're looking for. We need like a header image and then some breaks or whatever. And it came up with like these cowboys in the Wild West, and like the instead of the ground, it's like kind of looks like a futuristic computer, like how they show like a computer motherboard in like a movie or something, with like a Wild West scene, but all in like kind of like 80s colors. Anyway, it was fascinating. But what was interesting is I had some other things I needed to talk about, like for job postings and like different types of roles. And we kept trying to create words. And like, I don't even try to use Dolly with words, but it is like, it not only like messes up the letters, like in the order of the letter, like, and it's sometimes it gets so close. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then it'll have just like characters that aren't even English, or I don't know if it's like some other language character, but it like doesn't make any sense. And so then I'm like, what some of the prompts that I have to use, like, this is what I want. Please represent it only with shapes, no characters, no words, no letters, no numbers, nothing, because it looks like gibberish. And I think, yeah, it still had it in there for like, but it was at least uniformly chaotic, right? It wasn't like a couple of the words almost made, but it was just like looked like future letters that wasn't a real language. But I will say also what I like about both ChatGPT and creating content in Dolly is I'm able to, as a creator, only create based on my experience in the world and what has influenced me as a person. And so these AI tools are able to remove any bias that I might have and be able to prompt me to move beyond what my limitations are based on my experience and like seeing things that I like, And so instead of creating the same thing, no matter what creative an artist you are and what influences you might have, you're still going to have your own vision of whatever is inside your brain based on the experiences you've had. And to be able to have this tool that can offer you a different perspective and also speed it up a little bit, right? So I can say to ChatGPT, say to whatever the tool is, like, this is my vision. How do you think it will be perceived by this audience? I've seen other people talk to their audience successfully with this voice, right? So like, back to more Cowboys, like the Dallas Mavericks. So like, I want Mark Cuban's voice because he's been successful in whatever business. So write this based in Mark Cuban's voice, create this based on this sort of successful branding. And I mean, I just think it inspires me. It gives me the opportunity to see things through a different lens.
I love that. Carrie, I'm just going to ask you, just in case in your copious amounts of free time that you spend a lot of time doing something creative. I know you use ChatGPT. We've worked with it together. Do you have any favorite creative tools that you like? And if so, what are they?
I mean, crayons for sure. If I'm drawing, I can't really compete with this crowd on that creative thing. But I agree with Drew when he says it helps with concepting sometimes. So if I've got a brand new subject and I don't know anything about it, I might go to ChatGPT and say, explain like I'm 5. What are just the basic, just give me the framework and the outline. And you can't really rely on it to be honest or accurate, but it gives you a framework in your mind so that then you now can go to your more trusted sources to say, yeah, this tracks, or they missed this issue, or I didn't quite explain this right. But they spotted the issue and that was enough, and I didn't have to create that from scratch. And so it's faster. And, to Colleen's point, sometimes it comes up with stuff where I was like, okay, was not expecting that. Hadn't been thinking about it in that way. So that's interesting. And I really like the way that it's described as a tool that helps augment the human mind, the human skill set, capacity, creativity. It's for those that know how to use. They say the English degree is kind of like the next big thing. And thank God that I have one of those, because someone might actually hire me. But it definitely feels like if you know how to use it and you start getting your hands in there and getting dirty now, imagine how, and figuring out what the limitations are even, right? We heard Colleen describing some things where she's like, okay, all right, no, that's right. You had to keep telling the robot different things. That's your prompt engineering, and figuring out what it's going to spit out and how do I change this to make it, work. And that's a skill set that everybody's learning right now. And you're already leaps and bounds beyond maybe, what the average person out there has been able to do. So hopefully that's going to position you, well, Colleen, maybe you're seeing that more in your line of work, but maybe that's going to position you well with some employers who are trying to hire for that 21st century workforce.
Love it.
But to answer, I was going to say, to answer your question more directly, I'm in all more the texty things than the, I've certainly tried Midjourney, and that was interesting, but I don't really measure need for images, but I've tried, Bard and ChatGPT and Claude and all the things, and they are good for different reasons.
Nice.
I have a question, and I'm going to ask it in a minute from one of our attendees, but I want to start because this whole discussion about prompt engineering leads me to a little bit of what we were talking about as a team earlier today, which is ownership, right? And so can we talk a little bit about content ownership? Maybe Carrie, you can, level set us in terms of what is today and maybe where we're going tomorrow. And then maybe Drew can jump in and talk about his creativity. And then I will ask the question from our attendee.
Sure. So in terms of leveraging these generative AI tools for creative endeavors, there's really two things you have to look at: the law and your terms of service for whichever provider you're using. So if you are using the free version of ChatGPT, chances are you just have a license to use whatever it is that you've created with ChatGPT, but you may not own it outright. If you're paying for it, then you get a different set of rights that are more consistent with a proprietary interest. But regardless of what the terms of service say, the terms of service can say that you own the thing, asterisk, because you still have to meet the conditions that are under the law for acquiring your copyright or your trademark. So you have to look at those two things together. And the state of play right now is such that you've got the Copyright Office coming out and planting a stake and saying, if you used a robot to create it, that is not human authorship, therefore you cannot copyright it. And that leads to some interesting questions, which I'm sure we're going to get into here in a minute, Trisha, about, well, that's really fine and nice when you can separate out what the robot created and what the human created. Maybe that's really easy to do with text because there's for a finite numbers of words, and you could figure out, okay, how many words did the robot create? How many words did the human create? Like, how much is there a substantial creative contribution here by a human? When you're talking about an image, it's very different. And I think there's a question on the table about whether the Copyright Office has actually gotten it right. And Trisha, I don't know if you want me to get into this right now or not, but there was a time in this country where if you took a photograph, that was considered not copyrightable because you just use a machine to point it at an object, and it was just a mechanical thing that was happening. There was no creativity. And anybody who's a photographer out there knows that, I guess maybe if you're just some rando pointing your camera around at Disneyland, sure, but most photographers are thinking about the subject matter and the lighting and the props and the design and the angle and, the light value, right? This is your area, Drew, more than mine, but there's it's a composition, right? There's a whole bunch of creative elements that go into that. And so, of course, now, Getty Images wouldn't exist if you couldn't copyright photographs. And I think there's an argument to be made with AI, because if you really are just saying, hey, robot, write me a thing, and it writes you a thing, and then you just go use that thing, for sure, there's maybe not a ton of human creativity there. Maybe your prompt was super creative, but, I think most people can agree that maybe not creative enough to have that authorship imprimatur on it. But now what happens if you've got multiple iterations of that thing, right? You've asked Midjourney to create an image and it's given you 4 images and you've picked one. And now you've gone through 600 and something iterations of that. This actually happened in real life with a painting that won a contest, like a prize. And the art world is up in arms because an AI was used to help. But this person had entered 600 and some odd prompts and was directing it and narrowing it down, and actually had quite a bit of human creativity that you would think would be the imprimatur of authorship. And yet the Copyright Office thinks not. So I think there's an interesting argument to be made that the Copyright Office has it wrong. They're behind the technology, and that we don't really need to take the photography position that we took back in the 18th century, 19th century. We actually could move beyond that vision and start protecting creative rights. So I'll stop there because I feel like, Trish, if you think I missed anything, let me know. But that's sort of the state of play as it stands right now, which is, you know, agencies are saying things, maybe courts are going to start saying things, and we don't know if they're saying the right things. And this could very well change, but that's where we are right now, April 18th, 2024.
Love that. And I wanted you to answer that before I get to the audience question, but Drew, you want to jump in? Do you have anything to add, or Colleen?
No, I mean, I think that's really wonderful points that you made, and there's just so much to cover on this. I think I'll go to the question whenever you're ready for that.
I mean, I just would say that it feels like we're at the beginning. Like AI feels like the industrial revolution of create, like, and the creative side of like, people are gonna be afraid. And I think this, I don't mean to be, I saw what the question was, so it is a little bit of that. But
Jumping ahead, Colleen?
I'm not meaning to jump ahead.
On. I was trying to get us set up without,
I was creating
I knew we were going to go there, and I was like, we're going to kind of get there. So now
but
go ahead.
I think it sounds like they're behind, right? We've always had tools. So like the Industrial Revolution created tools that, you know, eliminated jobs. Other jobs are going to be created. We are not going to remove designers and writers. That's just not going to happen. There's still going to be a need for sentient beings and ideas to move the needle and to create new things and to be able to build the prompts. There's a person behind all of these prompts that make these things. Creatives have always used tools, right? Something. I mean, Photoshop, any of these, you know, other Adobe Suite things are all tools people created. This is just another tool to create new content.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think there are organizations out there to support other organizations so that they can find their way ethically and safely. But the question is, and I'm going to go ahead and give the setup because I think it's interesting how pervasive this is. This person says, I was on a call about AI yesterday. It was a kind of introduction for multi-sector professionals. Every person I met in the chat rooms thought AI was dangerous. No matter the question or subtopic, the conversation came back to, we need to figure out how to rein in AI so that it does no harm. My experience as a content and communication strategist is different though. AI has been really helpful and engaging. In your experience, what is the best way to begin responding to the big fear? So I thought that our sort of ownership conversation was a good setup. And then we could delve into that because certainly that's a lot of what AIGG does, but individually, who wants to jump in first? Okay, Drew.
Yeah, in terms of that big fear, you know, it's so interesting about that with all the different technologies that have come out and, you know, over the course of humanity, you know, with photography kind of being that latest iteration of it, you know, there's been the loss of jobs, there's been the creation of new jobs, there's been this concept of, you know, photography is going to ruin, you know, the world for illustration, and people are going to be, you know, without any anything to do. But then also too, think of what photography did in terms of opening the world up, you know, and all the world became creators. And now we have this other tool, AI, that is doing it on, you know, an exponential level beyond that, because now we're not all just photographers, we're all illustrators, we're all, you know, 3D experts, we're all writers, copywriters, and all the different types of writing that can be done. And these are just kind of the core principles. And so now what we're doing is opening it up to the world, and the world has these strengths. I think back to what Colleen said, we're always going to need, though, the professionals that know how to do photography very, very, very well, and design and creative direction, strategy. We're going to need people that are very creative writers, because the ideas behind those things, the human component, is always going to be sought after. And I think there perhaps will be less of those people, less of those specialists. But I think the best of the specialists are going to rise to the top. And certainly we saw that with website design as an example. I'm a website designer, and you know, in terms of website creation tools that are out there now, anyone can create a website. So the question is, well, what do website designers do anymore? The key is that they're moving on to doing bigger and better things. They're doing the kinds of website design that these tools can't do yet. They're doing custom things that the tools just aren't capable of. But the other thing is they've moved on to positions of being the people that think of what needs to be done for a website, what should be done for the website, what is the best type of solution for that particular application. Not always done by a machine necessarily.
Great. I have some thoughts too, but I'm the moderator. So Carrie, do you have any thoughts, or Colleen?
I have a few thoughts. I would say, one, people should be afraid. Number two, why let that stop you? Right? Like, abstinence-only education didn't work. When the internet first came out, everyone was losing their mind.
Right.
Right? You can't stop progress. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't regulate it, because, listen, maybe on a sort of a macro level, if you measure things over time, it's going to move us in a particular direction. That doesn't mean it's not going to ruin lives today for the people that are getting laid off, you know, by companies like Disney or Elon Musk's company, right? Like, lives are getting ruined today. Maybe that's because of AI, maybe it's not, but you know, you don't want to be too glib about it. But unfortunately, like, you can't really stop change. And so that's why I think it's important to be thinking about governance and ethics, because if you're at an organization and you are either designing something, or you're in a position to make policy or to have a voice at the table about these things, you can make these ethical and moral judgments. You could make those by design. It doesn't have to necessarily move at the, you know, I know that Silicon Valley likes to say move fast and break things. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know that we really need to do that for this. Because one, we already don't know which technology is going to win out. This is like a little bit of a race right now to see what's actually going to become the technology, or dueling technologies. You know, maybe we're going to have a Betamax, that whole thing again, right? Dating myself a little, like Apple versus IBM. So fear, a certain amount of healthy fear is good, but if you're letting that make you freeze and not do anything,
Right.
that's not going to change the outcome. You've got to act. And I'll nerd out just a little bit and ditto what both Colleen and Drew have said. Is Star Trek had AI. They still needed Captain Picard. They still needed Counselor Troy. They still needed Dr. Crusher. They still needed Lieutenant Commander Riker, Data, Geordi, Worf. Like, all of those, you know, key players were still necessary. And so, you know, embrace it, be realistic about what you can and cannot control, and be the voice of safety and ethics and reason within your organizations every time you can do that.
Nice.
Excellent.
And you ran that entire, you know, Starship Enterprise with just that small crew.
Well, you know, they were
And the red shirts.
and critical thinkers and problem solvers, and they could infer a lot. So you didn't need a lot then, right? But that's all of those great things you need, humans need, because obviously generative AI does none of those things. Colleen, go ahead.
I noticed that was just the Star Trek Next Generation. So I guess the first one didn't have AI.
You know, that felt very low tech to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roger that. I just didn't know. Okay. Those are great points. Carrie, I love what you said, Drew, too. But, you know, the thing that people are afraid of what they don't understand. That's how human nature works, right? They're afraid of change. I'm afraid of change. I don't, makes me super uncomfy, right? To a certain extent. You get excited about certain things. Other things are really scary, especially when it comes to maybe this thing is going to replace your job. AI is not meant to replace jobs, right? I mean, I think it might eliminate some positions, but then I think other things will be because of it. AI is a tool meant to augment human capabilities, not replace them, right? So I love it because it makes me work faster and better. And it can sniff out a spelling error or a grammatical error or help me write what I want to write as someone that is neurospicy and had learning disabilities growing up. Like, I get really stuck writing sometimes, but I have really good ideas and I know what I want to say. I just need someone to help me write it a little bit faster. So it's like my little buddy when I'm working of like, what do you think about this? How is this going to be received? Because sometimes I have a narrator in my head of like, this is going to be hilarious to send to this client that you don't know, right? Like I sent an email to somebody anyway, but like I wanted to talk about how I love their pajamas and I have Christmas pajamas from this company and I wear them year round. And I had this whole story that I was going to tell in my head and I ran it past ChatGPT and they're like, maybe just say something else because they don't know you know? Sent it
Wow,
anyway.
judgy ChatGPT.
I know.
I have not met
sent
judgy
it anyway.
ChatGPT yet.
But the other thing I want to say is we as people can sniff out a bot. Like it is, you're not gonna be replaced by robots. It's like, I mean, I say that, and then this is gonna be something in like 150 years, gonna be like, did you see this woman who was totally wrong about being replaced by a robot? But
a robot will be saying it to another robot.
yes, be like, this is dumb human.
Yep.
But like what Drew is saying is like, with a website, yeah, you can go to Squarespace or Wix or whatever and have a template that was created by a person that may have had AI help and will continue to have AI help of like, where do you want to drop this content box? Do you want to have words here? Do you want to have pictures here? And the AI will help you do it, but somebody had to create that code. Somebody had to help create that thing. And when you go to a website that is innovative, that you can tell a creative human being made versus I mean, I look at portfolios all day long. And honestly, the ones that are templates are great and they're fine because that's what they're used for.
Sure.
There are enterprise scale organizations like the DMV website or, you know, like the IRS website or super gigantic things that have complex security and other forms that you have to fill out. I don't know that AI is going to be a thing that is going to replace it. They will be able to create maybe user experience wireframes and assist with how best to organize the information. But I don't think we're there yet. I don't know that we're there yet, but like it is not scary to me because I think it is a way to enhance human ideas and move us forward in a way that I think eliminates bias to make us work better, faster, stronger. Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, this one by Kanye.
Oh my God, we're gonna get $6 million. Is that $6 million man? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But I guess to land the plane here is like nature finds a way. Like this is the beginning of something, and when that starts, like Carrie was saying, like the internet was really scary. It's like people are like, I don't want any part of this. Like, yeah, because it feels crazy. It feels like the robots are going to take over, or maybe it's great, and it's a way for people who can have access to information and tools to help them succeed where they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Right.
Right. I will just add to that, and then I promise to go back to being a moderator. But all of you have said essentially a version of either don't be afraid or be afraid, but we still have to move forward. And so I think that is part of the message. But I think it was from Harvard Business Review, but if it's not, we'll make sure that when the this goes out on our blog that we're correct on the source. But there are leaders and laggards in business. And the leaders are already involved in AI and have been. And the laggards are those organizations that are putting their earmuffs on or sticking their head in the sand or just going, I'm afraid and I don't want to do anything. Let's see how it shakes out. And what we have found is that that's a 60% difference between leaders and laggards. And the important part of this, and I think this is how the big fear needs to be answered is, yeah, you can be afraid, but as the chasm widens, which they say it is doing between leaders and laggards, an organization has to decide, and a person really, because that's also going to be, you know, our future
Yeah.
jobs. Do we want to be a leader or a laggard? And then my quick question is, remember all those organizations that chose not to jump on the e-commerce bandwagon?
Right.
Do you remember those, Carrie?
Hmm.
Colleen?
Radio Shack.
I don't.
I get my
I
walkie-talkie.
forget.
So anyway, that's the short, quippy kind of leaders and laggards kind of answer to help maybe organizations that are afraid and people that are afraid to go, oh, I must move forward. Okay, so that was
Can
my
I-
political soapbox.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
make? I wanted to add to that because listen, you're already using AI, whether you know it or not. Your employees are on ChatGPT. They've done studies. They're on there. Are they giving away your confidential data? Maybe. Are they inputting personal information? But yes, we know that they are. And if your employees aren't using ChatGPT, then all of the software as a service that you're using in your organization are having their terms of service, perhaps surreptitiously, or maybe they're telling you about it. They're updating their terms of service. We've seen this over and over and over, where you are now giving them the ability to use your data to train their models. They're collecting more data. And so it's already creeping into your business. So that whole, what was it, earmuffs and head in the sand, I don't know what to tell you, like, you're infected. So much better to figure out where your exposure is and where your opportunities are. And you don't necessarily have to pull the trigger on moving and implementing a whole bunch of things, but you should be eyes wide open about what's already happening around you and possibly inside your organization, and showing some leadership, because people are desperate for that. They want to see their leaders plant a stake.
And I just would add simply that, like what you're talking about, is that people with their head in the sand and with their hands over their ears, those are the people that should be talking to organizations like AIGG.
Thank you, Drew. Colleen, did you want to add to that?
No, I think I just keep going back to the same things.
Right. So the big fear, I hope we gave you some tools, because it sounds like our audience member is actually, you know, if not bullish and a fan, definitely is already using it and is aware of the benefits. And I think this next question is also coming in, and it's an extension of this one, which is, how do you prepare an organization's marketing team and sales team in terms of AI responsibility and ethics? Because the content you're creating for an organization, we've already talked about the copyright challenges. So how would you, recommend preparations and getting organized to use that?
Interesting.
Interesting. Okay. Drew,
Yeah.
you want to jump in, or you want someone else to?
Yeah, no, I've got something on that. So in terms of, getting a team together and understanding the tools, obviously getting everyone trained in the same way on a particular tool, because, people can think that they understand the tool and what they're inputting. We've talked about data and, being really cautious with your data. Getting everyone on the same page is such a critical element to do. And the best way to do that is with written documents and training. And again, things that AIGG can provide. But in terms of the overall, in terms of creative, I think that's a really important point, because there are things that are really not meant for AI at this point. There are strategies that you have that that are fundamental to your business, that you already have in place in terms of the founding principles of your business and your business plan. And it's going back to those things before you start engaging with AI, because you want to make sure that the original founding principles that you're working toward as a business are all front of mind and are used in a way that really align with those goals.
Thank you, Drew. Colleen, Carrie, either of you?
I think this is going to be, I think Carrie should wrap this up with the lawyer perspective, because I mean, just in terms of my experience over the years, like with business affairs and things like I would think that there would need to be regulations around using the mark, or using AI for a mark, for a trademark, or whatever your brand logos are, and things like that, and rules about usage, right? So like internal decks or whatever, like you know, in terms of creating content, I mean, I guess it's I feel like I'm stuck between this, like there's a version of using AI that feels like cheating, right? That like you're gonna have them write a paper for you. But the other side is that it will create something innovative that maybe you wouldn't think to create. So using it as a tool to create prompts to help you inspire you or use it. I mean, like that's what I use it for. It's like for a buddy to like have another coworker that is unbiased, that is not doesn't have my experience, doesn't work in my industry, doesn't, you know, I could just float ideas by that can then inspire me to have innovative ideas to then apply that to something else. So that's where I feel like AI can be a tool that you can't argue with that sort of using it in terms of content creation and coming after it. But I would have significant concerns with using a prompt to create content, copying and pasting that, and then using it in the market, right? Having Dolly create, you know, if you're a small business and you start out smaller and you have Dolly create your mark, and then you go to, you know, go public with it, and then all of a sudden you're successful. And we just don't know where that's going to go yet, right? So I guess that is maybe a segue to Carrie of like, what are the dangers here, and what should people in positions of being able to control that or set those regulations what regulations should they be setting?
Right. So
Yeah.
the question
You
is,
mean
how
within-
do you, oh, you don't need me. You
No.
remember the
No,
question.
no, go ahead.
Well, I want to say two things. One, I'm going to remind you of what the question is, but also I see that you typed a response to one of our questions. I would love for you to tie things up with that, because I feel like everyone in the audience deserves to hear your succinct answer around big fear. So do you want me to read it, or you want to say it? But be succinct like you were in your...
Why don't you just read it?
Okay. So Carrie sent it's a direct response, but about big fear, Carrie says, another thing that tends to settle fears is to have a plan that you are executing against. This creates direction and a type of certainty that a team can organize around. Get those minds engaged and those feet moving, and there is less time for fear. And I do think that's true. Right?
Yeah.
The more we start working and getting busy, the less afraid we are, and then we get more comfortable with it. So anyway, I wanted to just share that with the entire audience. And then the question I'm going to remind you about, Carrie, is how do you prepare your marketing team, your content team, as they're creating with these tools? How do you prepare them?
From a legal standpoint?
Well, yes.
Yeah, so from a legal standpoint, there's probably a couple things I'm thinking about. One is infringement. I do not want to be looking down the barrel of an infringement claim. I do not want anybody's cease and desist letters. And so I think that there are rules and procedures and processes that you could put together. I'm not going to list all of the different things, but it might be something like a playbook that says, hey, these are some proper uses of ChatGPT. Understand that or Mid-Journey, whatever, right? Understand that that is just a starting point, and that or if this is something that we care about, you know, really putting out in the market, then we need to do our due diligence and run it against an image database when we're done, or run it against one of the plagiarism tools to make sure that we haven't actually taken somebody else's image or somebody else's data. Like that should be part of your process. And I actually have a blog post that we did. It's up on the AIGG website that is a mini checklist of sorts that covers some of these points. Another thing is if let's say that you're creating a trademark. So this is something that's going to go out there in the market. It's going to represent your brand. It's going to represent, you know, trust and the source of particular goods, let's say, and services. And you want to make sure that your proprietary rights are nailed down. You're going to have to make sure that you're hitting those indicia of authorship, and that you can actually show that you've done enough to whatever the robot put out to transform that into something that actually is copyrightable or trademarkable. And this is where your legal department could be very helpful in helping you putting this together and just saying, okay, listen, one, keep really, really good records of what the robot did versus what the human did. Maybe that's different versions. Maybe it's red lines. Maybe it's a log. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but you're going to need to be able to demonstrate to the Copyright Office that there is substantial human contribution. So there's a record keeping element to that should be part of your procedures and processes. There are a lot of things like that that you can actually start to build for your team that says, here are the tools we use and here are the things you can use them for. And we ask you not to use them for these things. There always needs to be a human in the loop. Look out for these particular risks, which is I don't want to infringe. And maybe I also want to make sure I own it. Maybe you don't care if you own it. If it's a blog post and somebody rips it off, you might not care. Not everything has to be copyrighted. Although if you're sitting in the C-suite and you're a big content creation outfit, you're going to want those assets on your balance sheet. Okay. So those have value. So when you start thinking strategically, you know, there may be strategic reasons why you want to make sure that you actually own everything. So there's processes and procedures you can put in place that will help you with that. There's some other considerations. This may not impact marketing as much, but I'm going to mention it because there may be data that has been shared with you by a third party, maybe a partner that you're talking to, or maybe a customer, that you are under a duty to keep confidential. Maybe you signed an NDA or a service contract that has a confidentiality agreement in there. And so be thoughtful about what information you're taking and putting into your robot. So if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, which does not provide any sort of privacy or confidentiality protection, it's right there in the terms of service, and you're putting your client confidential information in there, don't tell your lawyers that you did that. They're not going to be happy with you. If, however, you have the paid version, check your terms of service, but chances are that as long as you're complying with the terms of service and whatever community guidelines, and you know, there's a set of conditions in there that you have to make sure you're meeting, that goes into your checklist too, that you're complying with those, you should own it. And it should also be kept confidential, right? So you sort of killing two birds with one stone there. So there is a role for the legal team in here to just, you know, it doesn't have to be this long ass checklist. It could just be, listen, these are the main things that we care about. Just make sure you're hitting these 5 big things. And then if you can also do these small other, you know, 3 things over here, then we're going to be in really good shape. So there, Trisha, I think is maybe a little too technical and detailed, but
no, it's great.
you know, that is also something that we
Awesome.
can help you with, is to get that all organized and put together a very simple, you know, checklist that you can follow internally. And if you want a deeper playbook that explains the concepts a little more, that works more like that's annotated, where your employees can kind of self-help and work their way through it, then, you know, that's another approach that you can take, just depending on, I would say it depends on how much value is in that marketing function in your particular organization.
Thank you. And I'm going to remember, Carrie, that you said on this webinar that if you make a boo-boo, you should not tell your lawyers.
That's not legal advice. Not legal advice.
I didn't say it was. All right. I have a question from the audience, and it's a good one. And I love the way it's phrased because it's super like, how should people admit to using AI as a part of the creative process? I love the word admit because that sounds like maybe you used it and then you didn't. So let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about using AI in your process and how you share that or admit to it.
Yeah, I might answer that because that's something I've had to do several times. You know, it's interesting. A lot of it depends on who your audience is and what their perspective is, how deep your answer should be to them. If we've got someone asking the question that is very new to AI and they're afraid of AI and they think AI is a big threat, they're going to need a different kind of answer than someone who is just fluent with AI and uses it on a regular basis. So in terms of, you know, using AI to create something and having to really explain it to someone, have to, you know, explain the kind of how your use of AI is normal and acceptable because of the same kind of process that we've adopted as a society around photography and the use of photography and how it's changed the world. AI is the same, and really having to do that education piece. In terms of, you know, detailed end products using AI as part of the process, I don't think there's a need to specifically say created with AI, stamp it with AI, say that it was done with AI, tell everyone that ever sees it that yes, this was done with AI. I don't see the need for it on a general like basis, because it's the idea of a tool that was used to get to the end product. You know, when we use Photoshop to Photoshop something, as a society, we understand to Photoshop and what that can mean. people understand that portraits of people's faces are photoshopped all the time. Do we say this was photoshopped, it's not an authentic photo? No, we don't, and we don't come to expect that because of where we are in terms of our society. So I think, appreciating the difference between someone that is an AI novice and what they need to hear, and appreciating where I think the bulk of professional society is today. They understand that AI is part of the process, and that, putting a stamp on it is really going backwards, I think.
All right, thank you. Colleen, Carrie, opinions, thoughts, concerns, questions?
I guess, my question is like, who's gonna ask? Why would you have to say something? Like, who, I guess,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie personally. I would not say and represent something to say it was mine when it wasn't. There was a moment when I edited something of someone else's and they asked me, and I think it was a better product. And I think they felt slighted. The computer did it, but that ChatGPT, actually I was using Copy AI at the time. It was before ChatGPT came out. And it kind of did a better job, being more succinct, right? Like the spirit was still there, but like, that's the whole thing that I love about it for writing, is that it brings the spirit of what you want to say, and it just sort of polishes it a little bit. And there was some resistance there. And, but that's because that person is speaking from their lens of their work and their experience and what they want to show. And the content was going to a wider audience. And I was like, I think this speaks to this audience better, but I appreciate, your view. I guess I'm trying to find a scenario in which someone would say, did a robot make this or did you make this? Because I do think, like I said before, people can sniff out the robots, and that's where the people have to come in, right? Like, I'll ask ChatGPT to help me write either content for something or an email, and I'll work with it over several revisions, copy it into my own whatever document, and then finish it in my own words, right? If I were just to take the very first version of whatever the prompt was, no one's going to have to ask if a robot wrote it, because they're going to know a robot wrote it.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I guess unless, the whatever that trailer that came out not that long ago that was super impressive was like, people couldn't believe that it was AI had made it. But I'm going to toss it over to Carrie.
I'm going to say truth,
Yeah.
trust, and transparency, Carrie, and maybe it's a good time to talk about Sports Illustrated.
I was just thinking about that. And I was also thinking it depends on context. I mean, here we're focused on more of a creative expression. When you start talking about politics and journalism and photojournalism and things like that, I think there are arguments to be made for authentication. Okay, we just saw the recent kerfuffle with the Windsors, right? Where's Kate? And then there were arguments about whether the photo was real or not real. And then one of the agencies came out and said, we're going to put a warning on this. Like, they just asterisk that thing like Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire, right? So I think that in those other contexts, we need to be a little more thoughtful about the authenticity element, because of the risk of misinformation and Russians interfering in your election and things like that. But when you're creating something truly for like a product or content or something like that, I think that what Colleen and Drew says holds true. From a legal standpoint, here's what I would be asking. So you're a marketing agency that you create content for another person and they pay you to do this. What does your contract say? Does it say that you have to convey proprietary rights and whatever you've created to them? I bet it does, because they want to own it. Well, you better be sure that you actually have proprietary rights. So you could phrase it as, well, I convey whatever rights I have. Maybe that's fine, because who knows what rights you have. But if you actually say that you have the ownership of it and that you can transfer that ownership to them, then you better make sure that whatever you're creating meets those contractual requirements. Or alternatively, I think a lot of those contractual requirements are going to have to be updated to keep up with the technology and specify, how you're going to manage that piece of it. You don't want to be in breach of your contract. I think there's another question that's going to come up. This comes up in the law firm space a lot, which is, or it's going to, if it hasn't already, which is, if it just took you an hour to draft my contract and normally it would take you 5, how much are you billing me for?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean you're spending less time. Maybe you're still spending the same amount of time, but you're doing other things on the deal, or you're spending more time on the creative aspects and less time on like all the technical stuff. But let's talk about Sports Illustrated for a second, because Trisha, you raised it. This was a truth, trust, and transparency problem where Sports Illustrated, using an outside vendor that they pointed the finger at later, decided that they were gonna invent some writers with bios, you know, so-and-so likes to garden on the weekends. Okay, well, so-and-so's a computer. No, they don't. And then those writers, you know, generated some content. And oh, and by the way, the writers had helpfully ethnic sounding names to make Sports Illustrated sound like it was, you know, more diverse than it actually was.
Yeah.
I know, it was so gross. So so anyways, this content got published, and everyone was like, what the heck? Like, the writers are fake, the names are fake, the bios are fake, the stories are fake. There should have been disclosure, and there wasn't. And so there's a kerfuffle in the news. I think Sports Illustrated or the Arena Group, they ended up losing something like 20 or 28% of their stock value in one day, pushed them down into microcap territory, which is super embarrassing. The C-suite had to exit after that. And now the Sports Illustrated brand is actually licensed to someone else now, who's going to hire those writers back because they understand, you know, the value of integrity in journalism. But that was a real, I mean, it was a self-own is what it was. Like, there was no reason that they couldn't have just dropped a little disclosure in there that says, hey, we're experimenting with X, Y, and Z, or these, you know, these contributions were made with the assistance of, you know, AI help. The funny thing is they actually tried to lie about it at first. They tried to say, oh, those are just pen names that we allow our, you know, a real human was actually behind that, but those are just pen names that we allow our writers to use to protect their privacy. I'm like, no, I think the writers want their actual names out there so that they can get credit for the stuff. Anyways, it just didn't pass the smell test. And it's, you know, there were a lot of shenanigans, but it really is important, I think, to be, you don't want to hide it. I agree with you, Drew, that you don't have to be going around with a big sign that's like, I'm doing all the AI, but you have to figure out what your stance is going to be. And at a minimum, have a holding statement prepared, or some sort of statement that if a client asks you about it, or, you know, whatever, shareholders, board member, whatever, that you actually have something smart and reasonable to say. And then maybe reasonable minds can differ and you could talk about that, but at least shows that you're on top of your game. You've thought about it. You put something together, and you can say, here's how I look at it. I think the photography thing is a very good analogy. And, you know, I think that it's better to be truthful and upfront because those relationships are based on trust. And it's better to be transparent, but that doesn't mean that you have to have your Gucci label all over every freaking thing that you produce.
So we're coming up on an hour. I believe we are scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes, but I know folks oftentimes only block an hour. So I have another question that I think, again, most of it was answered, but the last piece of the question I think is fascinating. And we've talked about it a lot at AIGG because it's what we do. And it says, following up on using customer client data in ChatGPT-4 paid version, when might organizations want or need to be transparent with their clients whose data is being used in that manner? And in the event of a data breach or data breach of OpenAI, wouldn't this organization need to have terms of service that allow for such use to avoid liability in the event of such an incident? And I know we talk to our clients about this regularly. So go ahead, jump in, Carrie. I'm gonna let her lead Colleen and Drew.
Yeah, so I'll take the first question, which is when do you need to be transparent, or I guess, you know, ahead of this issue with clients, if you're going to be using your data into ChatGPT? That is a good question. I think it's really going to vary in terms of where are the relationships is the first question. You could just sneak some terms into your contract at the next time that you renew it. And then it percolates up through the legal department into the rest of the organization to say, hey, they made these changes. Do you care about these things? It could be that in order to have trust with that client, you need to be upfront with them and say, hey, listen, we're starting to experiment with XYZ. What are your sensitivities? You have to think about the way that your client is thinking about it and how they want to be approached, right? And also you want to approach it in a way that gets you the answer that you want. And so maybe there's a little forum shopping that's happening when you're deciding how that makes its way into the organization. But it certainly helps if you can say, hey, listen, here's what we do. Here's what we're not doing. Okay. We don't collect this data. We have policies and procedures in place. We make our employees go through training. Like, you're creating this level of trust. Here's how we protect your data. These are the extra steps that we go through. We care about your data. You got to care about it as much as they do. You know, if they don't care about their data, there's certainly this attitude out there of, well, the internet's got all my data anyway, so whatever. And I'm like, I mean, I guess that's an approach, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be that even in your own privacy policies, like, you can point to those and say, this is an organization that protects your data, and these are all the steps that we take. So I think, you know, do you have to go knocking on all your clients' doors right now, telling them what you're up to? Not necessarily. But is there a conversation to be had by leadership and maybe managers with input from employees and other stakeholders as to how these things are going to be handled? Absolutely. So even if you're not running wild with the ChatGPT right now, you should still be marinating in this stuff. The second question is, in the event of a data breach, wouldn't that an organization doing that need to have terms of service that allow for them to use ChatGPT and avoid liability in the event of this? Also, is it going to 100% protect you? I mean, if you're lax and your employees aren't trained and you're being grossly reckless and, you know, grossly negligent or intentional or malfeasance, you know, law will sometimes look past those liability limitations and say, listen, you guys were ridiculous and we're going to hold you accountable. So you could put words in your contract, but then if nobody follows all the procedures, or you just go off and do something really gross and embarrassing, it's not an insurance policy, right? There's a whole bunch of things that work together: legal, the operations, employee understanding and knowledge. But yeah, if I were your legal department, I would certainly be in there tinkering with my terms of service and my individual vendor contracts and my privacy policy, and thinking about what data we collect, why do we collect it, how are we using it, how are we transmitting it, how are we storing it? Like, all of that needs, you build as much as you can into your contracts. You make sure your operations on lockdown, you make sure your workforce is knowledgeable, and then cross your fingers and hope that that gets you 93% of the way there.
And then also maybe talk to AIGG about helping you do their terms of service.
Yeah, and we do all that fun stuff. We've been looking at these things, and just, again, we're really about bullish on the technology, but eyes wide open, understand, you know, where you're exposed and where you have opportunity, and just start to put those governance and those policies and procedures in place. They don't have to be perfect. Just get a framework there. And then as you start to live it, then it could become more of a living, breathing document. But having just some kind of guidelines right now is critical, because otherwise everyone's just out there doing their thing, and organizations have exposure.
Thank you.
Really scaring the crap out of you, like me too.
Thank you for scaring me.
You're welcome.
Well, we've already talked about it being a big fear, and we're meeting it head on. And that's part of the way to not be so afraid. What I forgot to mention, and I want to mention right now, is that it's AI Content Day in Portland. Did you know that, Colleen? Because you're up there, Drew. So it's AI Content Day for those of you that are in Portland, and the rest of us can tag in. And AI Portland is hosting an AI content event this evening. And so
I did know that, and I'm going.
Oh, yay! Great.
I was like, wait
Fantastic.
a second. It is. I was like, not only is it a big AI, I'm like, I'm doing this and that later today. Makes sense.
Yeah, that it's AI Content Day because you got a lot going on in AI.
AI Content
I was
Day.
like, hey,
That's awesome.
it's a big AI day. I didn't know it was official day, but yes, I'm going to that event at Kiln tonight.
Nice.
Awesome. So anyone that's in the Portland area, I don't know if you can still sign up or if you can just show up, but there you go. You got that.
Nice.
I don't know. Maybe it's sold out. I don't know because I'm not in that area. Okay, so we know it's AI content day. We've spent a lot of time talking about AI content. We are getting ready to wrap up. I've given us 10 extra minutes because I know we all like to talk. And so you've got 10 minutes to wrap up. This is my closing question. I always ask teams, and I'll help you if you need, but what hasn't been asked of you today that you would like to share? Like, what do you think, or what do you want to add to based on what we've talked about today? There's a lot that we've talked about today.
I liked one of the things that we talked about earlier today in preparations, Carrie. We were talking about, you know, how much the human component is a part of an AI creation, and depending upon, you know, who created it and the who gets to own it is based very much on the human component and how much the human involvement was made. And so in terms of what we do at Moto Interactive and the work that I do, you know, it's very much about the human component. We don't just use AI and come up with a result and say that's great. Mostly because it's the results that we're getting out of AI just as a ad hoc, you know, give it a shot approach. It's just not good enough. And so that we're refining this to the nth degree, you know, back to the idea of 600 iterations of something. We worked with one technology and combine it, go to the other technology back and forth. And so the human component, I think, is just a huge part of what's going on with AI. I think that's the part that a lot of people that are new to AI don't quite understand, is that the human component, if it's heavily involved, it makes AI much smaller thing, something much that you can be much less afraid of, and you see it more as a tool to use to get you to the next level.
Love that. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah.
Carrie, Colleen.
I can just say that, you know, we don't really talk about how to get started, right? We're all kind of in it. We're talking about what it's like to be in it and how to, you know, govern it and how to apply it for various things. Like that's where everybody is right now. But I think, you know, to not necessarily combat, but to address the question of fear is to learn about it. And the best way to learn is to try. And I think the thing that I would tell someone who hasn't ever used ChatGPT, what I do tell people who, you know, I can feel the eye roll through the phone, you know, that they're like, like whatever. And I was like, you know, ChatGPT, okay, I heard about it, I don't want to use it. And I'm like, you know, the Zoomers, Gen Zers are using TikTok instead of Google, right? ChatGPT is, like I was saying earlier, it's like an oracle. It's a gateway to so much information. And I think people are afraid because they don't know how to use it. And I'm like, talk to it like it's a buddy. Talk to it like it's a friend. Talk to it like imagine it as a person. Imagine, like I used before, like Mark Cuban. I was like, you can imagine it however you want to, and you can have it tailor the answers the way that you want it to, and just keep repetition and keep going and trying to like narrow out to create the solution that you're looking for. And this could be an answer to so many questions. One day I was just having a bad day, and I was like, I'm having a bad day. And it was like, this is early days, but it was like, you know, do you need to have a snack? Do you need to go for a little walk? Do you need to talk to a trusted friend? You know, it's like, and like emotional, like anything. And it could talk about the solution to so many things. And like what Carrie was saying, like, explain to me like I'm 5. There are ways that you can talk to ChatGPT where it's like, what's the thing, like everything I ever wanted to know, but I was afraid to ask. There are ways that you can ask ChatGPT things that will give you an answer and a solution better than Google, better than YouTube, better than TikTok, because it's going to be framed in a way, because you can ask the question in a way that you know you can answer it. I could say, hey, I'm a neurodivergent woman in my 40s living in the Pacific Northwest. I need a solution for X. Like, I just found a love for reading. I didn't think I was going to be a good reader. I've read 18 books since January because I asked ChatGPT. I said, hey, I have ADHD. I'm dyslexic. I need you to help me find some books that I'm not going to put down because I want to have a new hobby.
Nice.
And it gives you a list of books, right? So like,
That is awesome.
thank you. I'm very excited about my reading journey.
No kidding.
I'll land the plane there and throw it to Carrie.
Nice.
I didn't mean
That's
to
a
cut
great,
you off, but I'm like, wow, that's so cool. And that's one of those stories that deserves to be told about generative AI, right?
Yeah.
absolutely. And I hadn't thought to use ChatGPT for that, Colleen. So thank you. The farthest I got was asking what the Dodgers' chances in the World Series this year, and it declined to opine.
Oh, it did.
So yeah, it did. It gave me some lame answer. I probably could have tried to push it until I broke the bot, but I had other things to do that day. I guess what I would say is there's a lot that I would love to talk about, but for purposes of this session, I want to end it with saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We can do this, okay? There are, not to say that we don't have some significant challenges, we do, and I hope that our regulators get off their duffs and deal with it. But also, why do we need to wait for the regulators to tell us how to be? We already know everything we need to know, we learned in kindergarten. We know how to be decent human beings. That's why it's a privacy by design. That's why in your organizations right now, when you're putting your guardrails and your guideposts together, you start with the human element and you build that in to your values and your mission and everything that informs what you do in your organizations. You don't have to wait for someone else to be the voice. You can be the voice, lead and lean into that human element. And there will be a lot less to be afraid of, because if this is coming from a groundswell versus a top down, it's going to be much more authentic and it's going to fit more with what you're trying to do as an organization. So you can do this. You got it. Just get organized and start doing the thing.
Love it. So truth, trust, transparency, ethics, and design. I love it. And meeting fear head on. Did I sum it up?
I think so.
It's 2:12, which means we're ending a couple minutes early. I'm always so excited when that happens because that gives everyone back 2 whole minutes of their day. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I want to thank our panelists for joining us today and bringing such interesting opinions and thoughts and being experts in the area. I want to thank our audience for asking great questions and being fun to ask those questions and listen to us while we have fun and share. I mean, we've talked about Star Trek. Did we talk about Barney Rubble today? I don't know. Anyway,
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday. The $6 Million Man. So yes, and reading. I love, Colleen, you get the win today because I think that's so super cool. Last time you said something about generative AI makes my brain bigger. So you are 2 for 2 in my opinion. So thank you. And thanks to 52 Limited. And we'll see you next month on the 1st of May. Is that our next Ask Me Anything? 1st of May, I think. And what is it about, Carrie? It is about, sorry, I don't remember.
It's really a data, it's data policies, data plans, how you protect your data, an element of cybersecurity, and then some of the legal fun stuff that goes along with that, because these machines need your data. These models, they need massive amounts of data. They're coming for your data. And you definitely need to have thought about, your data practices and, your architecture, your actual like IT infrastructure and how all that's going to work. So we're going to have a data scientist, me, we're going to have a marketing branding expert, and we're going to have a cybersecurity expert. And I think maybe some others, Trisha, but we're really going to get into kind of like some of that technical data stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I think and you'll see a whole different crew of us except for Carrie, I think. Are you on that one, Drew? I think it's a whole different group otherwise. So anyway, hope to see you all there, and keep your eye out on LinkedIn for that invitation. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Take care. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.